Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. We just read the Yizkor service, and I've always found it to be somewhat paradoxical. Because the specific Yizkor prayer says what? Yizkor Elohim et Nishmat so-and-so, right? May God remember the soul of the person for whom we're praying. And it makes no sense. I mean, we're asking God to remember somebody, like God needs a reminder to remember. I mean, who really needs the reminder? Us, right? But we don't. I mean, this is what I really think is the origin of this prayer. We don't want to acknowledge our own propensity to forget. So we create a prayer that reminds us to pray for the souls of those who went before us, but we couch it in the idea that we're really reminding God to do that. Okay, but why do we do that? And what is the value of memory? Okay, and in the world of Jewish learning, there's this bracha, not a full bracha, but we say Baruch Shekivan. Okay, blessed be the one who pointed me to like the source I need. So a lot of the material that I'm gonna share with you, I was pointed to by a shiur, a lesson on Sefaria.org by Rabbi David Winship, who is a beloved teacher in the Boston area. And he tells us that researchers have begun to see that there's a causal link between storytelling and thriving. Okay, and I began yesterday my rabbi's message with a story that I heard from my great aunts about their life in Ilya in, I don't know, the late 1800s or early 1900s. They came here in the early 1900s, and I said that I don't know if the data, the details in that story are actually true. Doesn't really matter because it reflects a certain reality, and it gave me a sense of understanding where I came from. Okay, and in 2001, there was a study of children's psychological health and how it connected to the knowledge of their own family history. And they created a do you know scale. Do you know where your grandparents met? Or how and where your parents met? Do you know of an illness or something really terrible that happened in your family? Do you know what went on when you were being born? And this is what they found. The more children knew about their family's history, the stronger they had a sense of control over their own lives, the higher their self-esteem, the more successfully they believe their families function. This do you know scale turned out to be the best single predictor of children's emotional health and happiness. And 2 months after this study was concluded, 9/11 came along, and the researchers went back and studied how these children reacted and dealt with that trauma, and the results were the same. The ones who knew more about their families, this is a direct quote from the study, proved to be more resilient, meaning they could moderate the effects of stress. And so these researchers coined the term the intergenerational self. The intergenerational self. What does this do for you? It gives you a sense that you're part of something bigger, that you are an episode in a larger narrative. Okay, one of the researchers who happened to be Jewish told a reality about his family and his buddy. Okay, and this is where we get the term Bubba mice, right? Bubba mice, which literally, and we take it colloquially like, you know, a ridiculous story, but it really means a story told by grandma. And this researcher found that sometimes Bubba mice are really actually helpful, right? So in his family, his buddy would say, you're having trouble with math? Let me tell you, your father really had trouble with math, okay? You don't want to practice piano? Boy, your Aunt Laura didn't want to practice piano either, right? Whatever problem the child has, Bubby had a story to go with it, even if it's made up, okay? And I mean, that's why that story was so resonant. I don't know if it was made up, right? But it situated me in my family's history, which particularly on that side of the family was something that I had lacked since I never knew my grandparents on that side of the family. And it was only when I was in rabbinical school, right? Because this is the other thing, children of immigrants are sometimes like ashamed of how their parents don't really fit into the culture, right? So they don't pass on what they received to their kids, right? So I learned very, very little about my grandparents or that whole side of the family from my dad, and I had to find it myself, which I started to do when I was in rabbinical school because I was studying Jewish history. And actually, what really kicked me off was I was studying the kashrut of cheese, okay, which is a complicated issue. So I asked Tante Malka, how did they make cheese in the whole country? And that's what really kicked off my exploration of my family's history, right? And when we learn our family's history, we know we're not alone. Those who came before us had triumphs and struggles just like we do. Okay, but then the researchers found 3 types of family narratives. Okay, the ascending narrative, right? We came from nothing and now we're successful, right? And then, of course, the descending narrative, right? We used to have it all, now we have nothing, right? But the most healthy type of narrative, they call the oscillating family narrative. We've had our ups and downs, but we persevered as a family, right? We've suffered, but we've also triumphed, right? And this is the story that we tell at the Pesach Seder every year, right? And this really is our story as people, not only our story, but the way we tell the story, right? It's not all good and it's not all bad, it's not all failure, and it's not all triumph, right? It's an oscillating narrative, but we're part of this story. And for me, it's summed up, there is a phrase in modern Hebrew that's been around for a while, but after October 7th in particular, I heard a lot of my Israeli friends say it. Avarnu et paro, na'avor gam et zeh. Okay, we survived Pharaoh, we'll survive this as well. Right? And because why? The whole door by door, right? In every generation, we see ourselves as if we left Egypt. It is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. And that is the value of memory. It places us in a context. We didn't come from nowhere, right? We're part of a story, and that story is a story of destiny. We got through Pharaoh, we'll get through this as well. And this memory is what sustains us. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. Great, yeah, excellent. So we continue with Musa for Yom Tov, and so because we're including